Karibisha Watanzania wote nikiwa diwani wa kata hii ya Wazo kwamba ndani ya kata yetu ya Wazo kwenye mtaa wetu wa Madale ndipo ambapo amepumzishwa mpigania uhuru wetu tangu wakati wa TANU, kiongozi wetu mzalendo na shupavu na mmoja wa waasisi wa taifa letu la Tanzania, Mzee Rashidi Mfaume Kawawa.
Welcome. And we also welcome you to the house of the late Mr. Rashidi Mfaume Kawawa as our honorable councillor of our ward has already given you a briefing. I would also want to introduce to you briefly saying that I'm called Hawa. I'm the second born child of Mr. Rashidi Mfaume Kawawa. Mr. Rashidi Mfaume Kawawa had a lot of children. And here is the sister of the late Mzee Rashidi Mfaume Kawawa. Wow. She's called Madam Amina. And I have my young brother who bears the same name as the father, Rashid. Oh, so wow. He's the Rashid. And the wife is here. She's Mrs. Rashid. Oh. We have been introduced to our I call grandfather. Oh. Yes. He is the brother-in-law. His sister was married to my grandfather. Oh. Yeah. Wow. And the wife is here also. Wow. So in brief, we also have the grandson of Mr. Kawawa, who is also named Rashid. That was his grandfather. Yeah, and our colleagues from Madale have already been introduced. I could just say briefly, Mr. Rashidi Kawawa has a long history that I don't know where to start and where to end. You can write 100 books about Mr. Kawawa. But in brief, he was born in 1926, February, in a village called Matepwende, which is in southern part of Tanzania. We have several regions in Tanzania, about 25 or more. So one of the regions is called Kuhusu region. It's in the border of Tanzania and Mozambique. Moi, je ne parle pas bien français, mais comme ci, comme ça. Je vais parler. Mais italiano, ça, excusez-moi. I don't speak that, yeah. So he was born there and in 1926, and he was the dad was professional a hunter. My aunt will add some more if I've missed some important things. He was a professional hunter, and even the late Mr. Rashidi Kawawa was a very good hunter with also some of his brothers. So he was born there, and his mother was a farmer, a very good farmer, which some of us have inherited that farming, patience in farming. Wow. So from there they moved in several places with his dad and the mother. Their dad had several wives, but they lived in a communal life, and you could not differentiate which is the aunt, which is the... They lived in a very harmonious, and that is something that we learned. That is one very strong character of Mr. Rashid Kawawa. Mm-hmm. He loved socialization, he loved unity, he loved cooperation. So that is one of his very unique character. If I'm wrong, you'll correct me. And I think that character, which was inborn and which he inherited from his family, from his dad used to collect so many people living there. You won't know which are his own siblings and which one were just some friends and so forth. So from his childhood, he inherited that character of living together, working together, respecting work, hard work. His mother and even his aunts were very hard-working people, and the dad too was very hard-working person. So that one was from his childhood. He had seen physically, so he inherited those characteristics. I think those were the things that brought him up until he could now be very famous and led the struggle for liberation for Tanzania, Southeast Africa, and Africa in general. Yeah. So, if I can say schooling, yeah, he went to school. He was very clever, and during those colonial period, schooling was very hard. There were a few schools, and after his low primary education, because he did very well, very few children were selected to come to Dar es Salaam. And that was a very, very long walk. And there were, on those days, there were very few cars and the roads were very bad. So he used to walk. And that's why he remained very strong. And that's why he became strong and known as the Lion of War, Simba wa Vita. Because he was very strong. He used to walk miles and miles searching for education. He valued education, and not only for himself, he also valued giving education to others. That was another second very strong characteristic of Mr. Kawawa, because he knew that getting education is a big struggle, because he struggled to get education. And if he was a lazy person, he would have despaired, but he didn't despair. He used to walk miles and miles, and the roads were very dangerous. There were a lot of animals. They used to encounter a lot of animals, but he was strong because he knew the forest also, because his dad was a professional hunter, a very famous professional hunter, Mr. Mfaume Kawawa. Even if you Google in some places about a very famous African professional hunter, it was that Mr. Mfaume Kawawa. And Mr. Mfaume Kawawa also inherited it from his father, who had traveled all along from some of the small islands in Malawi to come looking for animals, hunting. And that's how he came to that place where he married their grandmother and later on their father. So it was in the blood. You know? So he used to travel all that way, and he did very well in school. At school, I can say it was at school also where he started his political ambition. Because at school, he used to organize the youth, lived his life. So in Tabora there, he was also one of the best students. He had to go to the university, but he didn't go to the university, not because, what was the reason? At that time, he had to care also to support his family. So he decided to leave, not to go to the university, but to start work. And he started work as a community, social and community development officer. Mr. Kawawa had that history from childhood. It's not something that he just imitated out of nowhere. It started from the life at that nuclear family. And then at school, he was always the leader, leading others, advising others, teaching others. And now to come to work, he started as I tell you, as a community development officer. But throughout that period, he used to do continuous education because he used to like. And another thing, he was very good in acting. He was the first Tanzania, also among the Africans, film actor. Unfortunately, those films got lost somewhere. He acted so many films and he edited those films. So that is another hobby or another talent that Mwalimu Mzee Rashidi Mfaume Kawawa had. He acted so many films, and some of the films he acted with our mother. It was in 1951 that he married our mother. He had 2 wives, and then later on also he married our other second mother. May they rest in peace. They are all died, but the siblings were still around, and we work harmoniously. So Mr. Kawawa, by then, he was working as a government servant in a colonial government. And the colonial government were very restrictive. They didn't want any civil servant to work, to be involved in the political movement. And by then, Mwalimu Nyerere and other famous people had already formed these political parties. They joined together. There was this Tanganyika African Association, TAA, and then later on in 1954, it was formed to Tanganyika African National Union, TANU, which later on that Tanganyika African National joined after the union of Tanganyika and Zanzibar, Tanzania. They joined with the Afro-Shirazi Party in Zanzibar to form Chama cha Mapinduzi, CCM.
Wow.
So Mr. Kawawa was very ambitious. He was so dedicated and very pathetic with this, the way the working conditions were for the blacks. Some of the blacks have graduated from Makerere, some were medical doctors, some were teachers, but they didn't get fair. There was no fairness from the payment and etc., incentives, etc. So this, it perpetuated him to start thinking about, okay, I cannot join the National Party, but what can we do? That is where they joined hands to start the Tanganyika Federation of Labor. That was the Federation of Labor. There were various labor parties from various sectors in the country. Some dealing with railway issues, some were farmers in Saiso, some were coffee doing, so there were several. But then they had to bring together to join hands so that they become strong. We say that together you can win. So they joined and formed the Tanganyika Federation of Labor, and he was one of the early leaders of that Tanganyika Federation of Labor, TFL. So he was now involved in another form, but also struggled for liberating by then the Tanganyikas. They had so many movements. They started collaboration with other parties, labor parties in Africa, in Ghana, in Ethiopia, etc. And also, mind you, for this movement, not only were the blacks, but there were also Europeans and Asians who were also touched with these inequalities and this oppression. So they also joined hands with them. So the movement started while Nyerere was busy with TANU, and Rashidi Kawawa was busy organizing this. And they used to start organizing strikes when they see there was no fair deal. And there were several times that Rashidi Kawawa was taken to court, but because people knew he was struggling for the benefit of the people, they used to pay for that. And there was a time even Nyerere from his own pocket. Nyerere was a teacher, a secondary school teacher, graduate from Makerere and also from Edinburgh, with masters. But he also retired from teaching to do political work, to liberate Tanganyika, Tanzania by now. Understand? Vous comprenez? So it went on. They started this collaboration with the different parties in Africa and forming this Pan-African movement for the liberation of workers and so forth. So it became very strong. At the time, there was a time also he had to leave work to strengthen this movement, because you cannot be in the same. Your master is the colonial master. And here, you are going against him and you want him to pay you salary. It's controversial. So he joined also the Tanganyika African National Union. He joined now hands with Mwalimu Julius Nyerere. And that's why we say these two people, as he said, the Honorable Council, that if you mention two names in Tanzania, you have to mention the name of Mwalimu Nyerere and Mr. Rashidi Kawawa, because he led that. So it went on, and then because they kept on demanding and sending people to the United Nations to demand for independence. Eventually in 1957, I think 59, the colonial government accepted to have two representatives for the Africans in the parliament, colonial parliament. By then it was called legislative council and so forth. So these two were selected, was Mwalimu Julius Nyerere and Rashidi Kawawa. So they were selected. Eventually, to keep it short, in 1961, December 9th, by then it was Tanganyika, we got our independence. And Rashidi Kawawa was the one amongst the first cabinet members in that cabinet after independence, and he was holding ministry, I think it was local government and housing by then. Yes. And then from there on, since then, he had been in the government until, it was 1985 or when he retired from government. And he had held several posts. But one of as the councillor mentioned, that after independence, Mwalimu Nyerere decided to strengthen the party in the country. So because he wanted to strengthen the party, he had to hand over to Mwalimu Julius, to Mzee Rashidi Kawawa for a certain period to hold that position as Prime Minister of Tanganyika. You know, that needs a really courage, honesty, integrity, and all, mention all. After a year, you say, I want my position back. And Mzee Rashidi handed it amicably.
Wow, wow.
And that is another thing why Tanzanians honor and respect Mzee Rashidi Kawawa. That part, very few can very few. It's historical. I'm not talking that on the point of view of because he's my father, but he also mentioned it and many other. It's a reality.
It's true.
So he held that government by then, after independence, was the prime minister. When the president came, after our country became republic, Mwalimu Nyerere was the president, and Mr. Kawawa was the vice president. It went on in 1964. In 1964, Zanzibar just got independence, but that independence was the colonials who were there, the Britons had handed it to the Arabs. So again, there was some unfair deal. So the Afro-Shirazi party, led by the late Mzee Karume, who is another very famous figure if you talk about Tanzania. They came up with the revolution. That was the Revolution Day of Zanzibar, and in April 7th, 1964, the two countries joined and formed the Republic of Tanzania. So complete, understand? Is clear? Or I'm going fast? It's clear. Okay. If you have questions, you are welcome. So that's how Tanzania was born. And since then, Mzee Rashidi Kawawa continued to hold several posts in the government and also in the party. The high-ranking post is secretary of the party and continue ministers. And there was a year when he was the minister for defense, and we had some problems also. I don't want to mention it, but he led. What I can say specifically that. With the struggle for independence of Africa, because as Kwame Nkrumah, who was the late first president of Ghana, he was also a pioneer for the liberation of Africa. He mentioned that if one country of Africa, part of Africa is liberated and the rest is not liberated, there's no liberation at all in Africa. So Mzee Kawawa or Tanzania by then was also in the front line for it was actually Tanzania was the center for the struggle of Africa. But he gave himself for this country, he gave himself for Africa. He gave himself for the people who were being oppressed. That is Mzee Rashidi Kawawa. Why he was named, his famous name is the Lion of War, Simba wa Vita. Because what? He was not afraid to make hard decisions. Once you are together, if it's a party or a group of people that you make decision, Mzee Kawawa was not afraid. He was there. If it's a decision which has been agreed upon, he would move forward. He would implement it. As the English say, he used to walk the talk.
Wow.
You know? Yeah. So he walked the talk. And several times he used to get the blaming because he implemented. So people just come and look at him who is implementing. He did not hesitate. If it's decision, whether they had, but they've been made and they've been agreed upon, they are they've been legally agreed upon, he would go forward and implement it at whatever cost. Our late mother, who died before him in 1994, he was also a strong woman. He was the chairperson of the women's wing of CCM. UWT, yeah. And the other one is my late young brother. So you'll find three, the cemetery, there are three tombs there. So that's in a nutshell. There's so much about Mzee Kawawa. We have a museum in Songea, which is our home place in southern Tanzania, Ruvuma. My father had constructed a house there, and it's a very historical house, specifically for the struggle of Southern Africa.